what is your relationship to the medium in which you make your art?
I'm completely promiscuous. I don't. I mean, I get in these whirlpools where I'll like stay with something for a while, and of course, there's some things I always return to. I like analog. Well, I like digital processes too, but I really like analog processes, and I have a couple of really particular skill sets that I often will kind of like fall back on because they're kind of like home based. Textiles is one of them. But I mean, quite literally, like I feel like that becomes part of the engineering of a work, and so I'm really open for anything to take whatever form it needs to. So oftentimes, and that's where some of that surgical precision comes in, is like if something needs to be made a certain way, I'll just figure out how to get it done, or I'll figure out how to collaborate with someone to get it made, or I do a lot of work where I collaborate with fabricators, but fabricators who are specifically trained for prop making in the Hollywood industry. I got really, really interested when I first moved to LA in the way that prop production kind of happened, because it's a really specific form of object making that's related to time, that has to do with temporality in terms of like something needing to last 3 weeks or 10 days or even an hour, like whatever that is. And so I started getting really interested in ways in which those kinds of objects function. So I use a lot of prop making. Or I'll learn a skill if I need to like figure out how to get something made, or I'll work with someone who has a specialty. So I move through really different materials. And then there's often times where I think the other thing that's important too with that is that like sometimes I'll sort of, it becomes an important part of the engineering of something to kind of decide if like the primacy of my hand is essential, or if the better tool or the more accurate tool is to work with someone else, or sort of outsource certain things, or some combination sometimes. So like for these pieces that are here at the Biennial, like I made all of these with my own two hands, and there's no one else in the sort of process. It's like a very individual and very labor intensive kind of just like, and that was essential conceptually for me because it felt like it had to be about this like sort of like personal anxiety being embedded into these pieces, and in some ways like the materiality being kind of therapeutic space too. But then there's other times in which like I'm kind of aiming at like a cooler temperature or something with the work, and so having the sort of like I just opened before coming here another exhibition that's like a public sculpture, like completely different threshold, completely different materiality. It's all made of fiberglass and neon and like completely different thing. So I'm all over the place, which can make people anxious. It makes capitalism anxious, bringing capitalism back in. It's not like, I don't know, it's not the most popular modality because it evades signaturism and it evades like kind of containing things. So
who is Amanda Ross, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. You're like, I don't know. But I mean, so sometimes I get anxious when I sort of am consistent for a while, and I feel the sort of like need to sort of break things open and introduce some new language. And so I'll try to like, okay, I got to switch it up for this next thing. So even just like showing these pieces again in this context, at first, to be honest, I was like a little like, I don't know, I just showed them. But they were so perfectly appropriate, and also they're a whole new body, a whole new group of them. So then I realized it was really perfect. But but there's other times like in context of like, different sort of presentation formats. I've done a lot of public work. I've done a lot of things like that you encounter outside. And so oftentimes people are like, who made this? Like it's like not necessarily clear. I mean, there's some things if you're like really paying attention that are like absolutely consistent. But I move through materiality in such a kind of like, loose way. Because it's just really, I just feel like it, I mean, that's the thing about sculpture that's kind of tough is like, and also exciting that I think is really important is that it's like even the sort of like, its physical aspects need to be reinvented each time. And so it's not like, of course you get attracted to certain materials. The materiality of the pieces in this group is obviously textiles, which again is like part of my skill set. And so I have like a literacy in that, and I know what I can do. And I had to actually sort of unlearn some things, because in the piece just before that, I was teaching myself like tailoring, and so that kind of sewing is very particular. And in these pieces, I had to sort of unlearn that and intentionally kind of disobey the rules of like how you would actually construct something in like a fine textile kind of construction. So if you notice, like the edges are raw and the threads are, I mean, they're theatrically amplified. That's not exactly, but also like not hemming things and not pressing and so like I was really like, oh, I have to like almost perform de-skilling this piece so that it can kind of like operate in the way that it needs to operate as like an object that is just barely holding together. And yet I also am interested in precision. I'm like really interested in that as far as like the gestures and how they function. But within that, hopefully there's like sort of a threshold of like of possibility for that to be messy or to be like incomplete or like,